The mansion door slammed in Debbie McPherson's face before she could finish pleading. Through the glass, her dead husband's mother turned away, refusing to even look at the two small boys shivering on the doorstep, clutching their mother's skirts. Respectable families don't acknowledge mistakes, the butler had sneered coldly, leaving them stranded 2,000 miles from home with nowhere to go.
Hello. If you believe every underdog deserves to be seen and lifted up, your support means more than you know. Hitting 1,000 subscribers isn't just a number for us, it's what allows these real, hopeful stories to reach people who might desperately need them to stay motivated. Your one click could be the reason someone keeps going. Please help us reach more hearts by subscribing now.
The fog hung thick over San Francisco's cobblestone streets as Debbie McPherson climbed the steep hill toward Nob Hill, her heart pounding with each step. The year was 1876, and she had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Ohio with her two young sons after her husband Patrick's death in a mining accident, believing his wealthy family would offer refuge. Now, standing before the imposing Charleston mansion with its ornate iron gates and marble columns, doubt crept into her chest. 7-year-old Nathan gripped her hand tightly, while 5-year-old Benjamin clung to her worn skirts, both boys silent with exhaustion. They had been traveling for 3 weeks, sleeping on hard train benches and eating sparingly to preserve their dwindling funds. Debbie had exactly $15 left to her name. She knocked on the massive oak door, her hand trembling slightly. A stern-faced butler answered, his eyes sweeping over her travel-stained dress and the children with barely concealed disdain. "I'm here to see Mr. and Mrs. Charleston," Debbie said, straightening her spine. "I'm Debbie McPherson, Patrick's widow. These are his sons." The butler's expression hardened. "Wait here." He disappeared inside, leaving them on the doorstep. Through the beveled glass panels, Debbie could see movement. A woman in an expensive silk gown turning sharply away, a man's dismissive wave. Minutes stretched like hours as the boys shifted uncomfortably beside her. The butler returned, his face cold as stone. "Mr. and Mrs. Charleston do not receive persons of your station. Their son made his choice when he married beneath himself. His debts and dependents are not their concern. Respectable families don't acknowledge their mistakes." Before Debbie could respond, the door slammed shut with brutal finality, the sound echoing through the fog like a death knell. Debbie stood frozen on the mansion steps, the butler's words ringing in her ears. Nathan looked up at her with questioning eyes while Benjamin began to cry softly. She had nowhere to go, no plan beyond this moment that had just shattered into pieces. "Mrs. McPherson?" A deep voice spoke from behind her. She turned to find a tall man in a dusty coat and wide-brimmed hat watching her with concerned eyes. He was perhaps 35, with sun-weathered skin and the quiet bearing of someone accustomed to hard work and solitude. "I'm Robert Charleston," he said, removing his hat. "Patrick's distant cousin. I was just leaving after my own, unsuccessful visit with the family." His jaw tightened briefly. "I couldn't help but overhear." Debbie's cheeks burned with humiliation. "We'll manage somehow." "Do you have arrangements?" he asked gently, his eyes taking in the two exhausted children and their single worn trunk. "Not yet, but I run a cattle ranch in Montana Territory in the Bitterroot Valley," Robert interrupted. "My schoolteacher left last month to marry a prospector in Helena. The children in the area, ranch hands' kids, homesteaders' families, have been without lessons since. Patrick mentioned once that you taught school before you married." Hope flickered dangerously in Debbie's chest. "I did. In Columbus, for 4 years." Robert nodded, seeming to make a decision. "The position includes a cottage on my land, salary, and provisions. I've got business in Sacramento tomorrow, then I'm heading back north. You're welcome to travel with me, if you're willing." "Why would you help us?" Debbie asked suspiciously, too many disappointments making her wary. "Because family should," Robert said simply, his eyes holding a sadness that suggested he understood rejection. "And because nobody deserves what just happened to you." The journey to Montana Territory took 8 days by train and wagon, winding through mountain passes that took Debbie's breath away. Robert proved patient with the boys' endless questions about cattle, horses, and whether there were still wild Indians in Montana. His answers were thoughtful but guarded, revealing little about himself beyond the basics of ranch life. When they finally crested the hill overlooking the Bitterroot Valley, Debbie gasped. The Bar-C Ranch stretched across thousands of acres, with a sturdy main house, large barns, and several smaller buildings nestled against a backdrop of snow-capped mountains. "This is all yours?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "Built it from nothing over 12 years," Robert replied with quiet pride. "Started with 50 acres and 20 head of cattle." A stout woman with graying blonde hair and a thick German accent greeted them warmly. "This must be the new teacher. I am Greta Hoffman, the housekeeper. Come, come, you must be exhausted." The teacher's cottage was small but clean. A main room with a stove and table, 2 bedrooms, and even curtains in the windows. A pot of stew waited on the stove, fresh bread cooling beside it. "Mr. Robert, he told me to prepare it," Greta explained, her eyes kind. Growing boys need good food. As Nathan and Benjamin ate ravenously, Debbie turned to Robert. "Mr. Charleston, I'm grateful beyond words, but I need to be clear. We won't be charity cases. I'll work hard to earn our keep." Robert nodded approvingly. "I expected nothing less, Mrs. McPherson. We'll discuss terms tomorrow. For now, rest. You're safe here." After he left, those words echoed in Debbie's mind. "You're safe here." For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe it might be true. If this story is touching your heart, subscribe to see how Debbie and Robert's journey unfolds. Sometimes the greatest blessings come from our deepest rejections. Autumn painted the Bitterroot Valley in brilliant gold and crimson as Debbie settled into her new life. The one-room schoolhouse, though modest, became her kingdom. 9 students, including Nathan and Benjamin, arrived each morning eager to learn. Her passion for teaching, dormant since marriage, blazed back to life. The boys thrived in ways that astonished her. Nathan shadowed the ranch hands whenever possible, learning to rope and ride with serious determination. Benjamin had adopted a scruffy cattle dog named Scout, the 2 inseparable companions exploring every corner of the ranch. Debbie helped Greta prepare meals for the 8 cowboys who worked the Bar-C, and she found herself watching Robert more than she should. He worked harder than any 2 men, treating his hands with respect, never asking them to do what he wouldn't do himself. Yet there was a loneliness about him, a careful distance he maintained from everyone. One evening at the community harvest gathering at the Dixon Ranch, Debbie learned why. "Such a shame about Mr. Charleston," Mrs. Dixon whispered over apple cider. "Losing his wife in childbirth, then his little Caroline to scarlet fever just 3 years later. That man buried his whole family before he was 30. Haven't seen him smile properly since." Debbie's heart clenched. She watched Robert across the barn, standing alone despite the crowd, and suddenly understood his guardedness. Later that week, as she returned books to the main house, she noticed a small wooden horse on Robert's desk, expertly carved, child-sized. "I made that for Caroline," Robert said quietly from the doorway. "She was 3 when the fever took her. 5 years ago this December." "I'm so sorry, Robert," Debbie said softly. "My wife died bringing her into the world. Caroline was all I had." His voice was hollow. "I can't go through that pain again. I won't." He left abruptly, and Debbie understood. He was already falling for them, and it terrified him. Winter crept into the valley with the first November snows, transforming the ranch into a frosted wonderland. Robert began joining them for Sunday dinners at the cottage, a tradition that felt both natural and charged with unspoken tension. Debbie noticed small changes in him. He laughed more readily at Benjamin's silly jokes. He spent patient hours teaching Nathan to sit a horse properly, his rare praise making the boy beam with pride. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. One evening, as the boys played checkers by the fire, Robert arrived with an armload of extra firewood. "Storm's coming," he explained, stacking it neatly by the door. "Want to make sure you have plenty." "Thank you. Would you like coffee?" Debbie asked, hoping he'd stay. They sat at the small table as the boys' game grew quieter, their voices eventually fading to sleep-heavy murmurs. Greta had taken them to bed, leaving Robert and Debbie alone in the firelit room. "Patrick was a good man," Debbie said softly, "but our marriage was practical more than passionate. We were comfortable together. Content. Sarah and I barely had 6 months," Robert replied. "I wonder sometimes what we might have become if we'd had more time." Their eyes met across the table, and Debbie felt the pull between them. Grief shared, loneliness recognized, hope beginning to take root. Robert leaned forward slowly, his hand reaching for hers. Debbie's heart hammered as his face drew closer, his breath warm against her cheek. "Mama," Benjamin's sleepy voice called from the bedroom. "I had a bad dream." They pulled apart quickly, the moment shattered. Robert stood, his expression conflicted. "I should go," he said roughly. "Good night, Debbie." She watched him disappear into the darkness, wondering if he was running from her or from the possibility of loving again. The blizzard struck without warning on a bitter January morning, howling winds turning the world into a whiteout within minutes. Debbie had just finished lunch when she realized Benjamin was napping, but Nathan was nowhere to be found. "Nathan," she called, panic rising as she searched the cottage. Then she saw it. The small wooden box where Nathan kept his father's pocket watch lay open and empty on his bed. Her blood turned to ice. Yesterday, Nathan had been playing near the creek. He must have dropped it. She ran to the main house, terror choking her. "Robert, Nathan's gone. I think he went to the creek for Patrick's watch." Robert's face went pale. He grabbed his heavy coat and called to his men. "Get ropes and lanterns. Now, I'm coming with you," Debbie insisted. "No, stay with Benjamin. I'll bring him back, I promise." Robert rode into the blinding storm, the wind so fierce he could barely see his horse's head. The creek was a quarter-mile away, but in these conditions, it might as well have been 100. His mind filled with horrible visions. Caroline's fever-flushed face, Sarah's cold hand in his, death stealing everyone he loved. Not this boy. Not Nathan. He found the child on the frozen creek bank, clutching the watch, his lips blue from cold. The ice beneath Nathan's feet cracked ominously. "Don't move, son." Robert dismounted and crawled across the ice, distributing his weight. He reached Nathan just as the ice gave way, plunging them both into the frigid water. Using every ounce of strength, Robert hauled them onto solid ground and dragged Nathan to his horse. The ride back was a blur of cold and fear, Robert's body screaming in protest as hypothermia set in. They burst through the cottage door, both nearly frozen. "Dear God," Debbie cried, pulling them toward the fire. Subscribe now. Their fight for survival has just begun, and what Robert reveals in his delirium will change everything. For 3 days, Debbie barely slept. She stripped Robert and Nathan of their frozen clothes, wrapped them in blankets by the fire, and forced warm broth between their chattering teeth. Greta took Benjamin to the main house, while Debbie focused on saving the 2 males who had become her entire world. Nathan recovered first, his young body resilient. But Robert's fever spiked dangerously on the second night. "Caroline," he mumbled, thrashing weakly. "I couldn't save Caroline. I'm sorry, baby girl. Daddy's so sorry." Debbie held his hand, bathing his burning forehead with cool cloths. "Shoo, Robert. Rest now. Can't lose them," he continued, delirious. "Can't lose Debbie, the boys, not again. Hurts too much." Her tears fell freely as she whispered, "I'm here. We're all here. You saved Nathan. You're a hero." By the 4th morning, his fever finally broke. Robert woke to find Debbie asleep in the chair beside his makeshift bed, her head resting on her arms at the edge of his mattress, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. He touched her hair gently, and she stirred. "You're awake," she said, immediately checking his forehead. "Thank God. How's Nathan?" His voice was rough as gravel. "Fully recovered. Asking about you constantly." She poured him water, helping him sit up to drink. After a long silence, Robert asked quietly, "What did I say? When I was fevered?" Debbie met his eyes steadily. "You called for Caroline. You said you couldn't lose us, that it hurts too much to love again." Robert closed his eyes, a tear escaping down his weathered cheek. "It's true. I'm terrified, Debbie. But I love you. I love your boys. And that scares me more than any blizzard." Debbie took his hand in both of hers. "I'm scared too. But maybe we can be brave together." 6 weeks passed. Robert recovered fully, but something had shifted between them. He held her hand openly now, kissed her forehead when saying goodnight. Let the boys call him Uncle Robert. Yet he still hadn't spoken of their future, and Debbie's hope began to waver. On a bright March afternoon, with the first hints of spring greening the valley, Robert asked her to ride with him. "Where are we going?" she asked as they climbed a gentle hill behind the ranch. "Somewhere I haven't been in almost a year," he said quietly. At the hilltop, Debbie saw a small grave with a simple wooden marker, Caroline Charleston, beloved daughter, 1870 to 1873. Robert dismounted and helped Debbie down. For a long moment, he just stood there, hat in hands. "I come here once a year on her birthday," he said finally. "Couldn't bear it more often. But this year, I wanted you here with me." He knelt by the grave, touching the marker gently. "Sarah died, giving me this little girl. I had 3 years with Caroline. 3 years of tea parties and bedtime stories, and her calling me Papa. Then scarlet fever took her in 2 days." His voice broke. "I swore I'd never risk that pain again." He stood and turned to Debbie, pulling a simple silver band from his pocket. "But you and Nathan and Benjamin, you showed me something I'd forgotten. A heart that won't risk breaking is a heart that's already dead." Tears streamed down his weathered face. "Marry me, Debbie. Let me be a father to your boys. Let me love you the way you deserve. I'm terrified, but I'd rather live one day truly loving you than spend another year just existing." Debbie's tears matched his. "Yes, Robert. 1,000 times yes." Their kiss, there on that hilltop between grief and hope, sealed their promise of forever. April sunshine streamed through the windows of the small log church as the Bitterroot Valley community gathered for the wedding. Debbie wore a cream-colored dress that Greta had helped her sew, wildflowers woven into her hair. Robert stood at the altar in his best suit, his eyes never leaving her as she walked down the aisle. Nathan and Benjamin flanked their mother, solemn and proud in their new shirts. The Reverend began the ceremony, his voice warm as he spoke of love born from loss and families built on faith. Then, as the Reverend asked for the rings, Nathan stepped forward. "Wait, please," the boy said, his voice surprisingly steady. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Patrick's pocket watch, the one that had nearly cost him his life. Benjamin stood beside him, nodding earnestly. "Mr. Robert," Nathan said, "we want you to have this. It was our pa's most precious thing. We want you to carry it, so he knows we're safe now. So he knows you're taking good care of us and Mama." The church fell silent. Robert dropped to one knee, his face crumbling as he pulled both boys into his arms. "I promise," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise I'll take care of you. You're my sons now, if you'll have me. Can we call you Pa?" Benjamin asked shyly. "I'd be honored," Robert managed, tears flowing freely now. The congregation wiped their eyes as the ceremony continued. When Robert kissed his bride, the church erupted in joyful applause. By summer, Debbie was expecting their first child together. One evening, the family gathered on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Nathan and Benjamin played with Scout in the yard while Robert's hand rested protectively on Debbie's growing belly. "You told me that first day, you're safe here," Debbie said softly. "I didn't believe it was possible then." Robert kissed her temple. "And now?" She looked at her sons, at the man beside her, at the life they'd built from ashes. "Now I know, home isn't a place. It's wherever love finds you, even when you've stopped looking for it." Robert pulled her close, thinking of that desperate woman on the San Francisco doorstep, and how one act of kindness had saved them both. "The family that rejected you led you straight to me. I'll thank them for that every day of my life." As darkness fell over the Bitterroot Valley, the house glowed warm with lamplight, a beacon of hope proving that sometimes the cruelest rejections lead us to our greatest blessings, and broken hearts can heal stronger than before. If this story of second chances and unexpected love moved you, subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage, redemption, and finding home in the most unlikely places. Your next favorite story awaits.
If you enjoyed this story, we appreciate you a whole lot and look forward to connecting with you as we build a community on this channel. Every day, we will put out more stories, so we need your support. Help us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. You won't miss any new exciting videos. Check out the next video. You'll love it!